Good afternoon and welcome to the joint general session of the ISO Board of Governors and Western Energy Markets Governing Body. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and currently all attendees are in a listen-only mode. There will be opportunity for public comment throughout today's call, at which point we will give you all instructions on how you can enter the comment queue. With that, I'd now like to formally begin today's call and turn it over to Roger Collington with the California ISO. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Silas, and welcome everyone. We're happy to have you here on a. I was going to say a Monday afternoon, but I think it's a Thursday afternoon, and so we will start out with our roll call, and then we'll turn to our briefly to our chairs. So let me start with Vice Chair Bornstein.
Here.
Member Campbell.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
Governor Edo.
Here.
Governor Galitova.
Present.
Chair Konzioka.
Here and present.
Governor Leslie.
Present.
Member Prescott.
Here.
Chair Shorey.
Here.
And Vice Chair Wagner.
Here.
Everyone is here and or present. And at some point, I feel like I need to have my legal team do a memo as to the difference between being here or present, but we will hold that off till next year, maybe. So welcome, everyone. I'm glad you are here. And our first agenda item is our chair welcome, and then we'll move to general public comment. So let me go ahead and start with you, Chair Shorey.
Yes, thank you, Roger. I just want to welcome everybody that's participating on the call. It looks like, as usual, we have a very good turnout. I want to thank those of you that attended the symposium last week. We've been getting pretty good feedback. I think there's an opportunity, if you want to give us your advice and comments on things we could do better or differently, or the things that you did like that you'd like to see preserved. So with that, we have a couple of very interesting topics to address today. We continue to make progress on all of our key initiatives, and we'll keep doing that today. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you, Chair Shorey. Chair Konzioka.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your participation in today's meeting. As Chair Shorey just mentioned, we have two decisional items that are of great interest to many of you, and participation in this meeting is always welcome. Please feel comfortable sharing during the public comment sessions, and we'll get going here, and back to you, Roger.
Thank you, Chair Konzioka. And with that, it's a perfect segue. We have our public comment. And for items that are not on today's agenda, you'll have opportunities to comment during the agenda items. But if there are any issues of interest that members of the public would like to comment on, now is your opportunity if they're not on the agenda. And so, Silas, if you could instruct our attendees on how to enter the comment queue.
If you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or #2 if you are dialed in through the phone line. At this time, there are no comments in the queue.
Thank you, Silas. With that, we can go to the next agenda item, which is the decision on our September 26, 2024 joint general session minutes. And if I can ask the members of the governing body and the board for a motion on that.
So moved.
Okay, and a second.
This is Rob, I'll second.
Thank you. Let me take the vote. And again, as I like to do on these Zoom calls so that we don't get confused and make sure we clearly record everyone's vote, I will call each member. Board Vice Chair Bornstein.
Aye.
Member Campbell.
Yes.
Member Decker.
Yes.
Governor Edo.
Yes.
Governor Galitova.
Yes.
Chair Konzioka.
Aye.
Governor Leslie.
Aye.
Member Prescott.
Aye.
Chair Shorey.
Aye.
Vice Chair Wagner.
Aye.
Thank you, governing body members and board members. The motion passes, and we can move on. The next item is to our CEO, Elliot Mainzer, for his CEO report. Elliot?
Thanks, Roger, and good afternoon, Chair Shori, Chair Kanzioka, ISO Board of Governors, and WEM governing body members. Great to see all of you. Appreciated the sentiment at the beginning of the meeting about the stakeholder symposium last week. We really enjoyed the opportunity to be together with so many colleagues from around the West and the country, and just to be able to review so much progress on governance and EDAM and the realm of transmission, and continuing to think about the role of hyperscalers and of course demand response in our market. So thanks again to everybody that attended. We do have a couple of substantive items for today, decision items. I think, as everybody knows, we having sort of emerged on the leading edge of the energy storage revolution here in the United States with over 10,000 megawatts of storage on our grid now. We're in a continuous learning environment about storage and optimizing the resources and understanding all the different nuances of how the resource performs on our grid. So the decision today on storage bid cost recovery enhancements represents a lot of work, a lot of engagement by our stakeholders, and a lot of heavy thinking about how to continue taking positive steps forward to understand all the different consequences of storage and make sure that we're still working in a positive fashion together to optimize their value on the grid. So thanks to everybody who's leaned in on this initiative, and looking forward to the presentations from Becky and Ben and Adam from the Department of Market Monitoring. We're also, of course, here today to take on the decision on that next step towards implementation of the West-wide Governance Pathways Step 1 phase. So looking forward to that discussion as well. And again, appreciate all the energy and work that got us to this point. So without further ado, I will turn it back to Roger, and we can begin moving through our decisional items for today. Thanks again.
Thank you, Elliot. We do have our bullet point here. If there's any board or governing body comment or question to Elliot, this would be your opportunity.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Next item on the agenda is our decision on storage bid cost recovery enhancements. And before I turn this over to Anna, let me just note for the record that we do have 3 public comment letters that were received, and that we have provided both to the WEM governing body and the ISO Board of Governors for their review. That is a letter from the body of state regulators, a letter from California Energy Storage Alliance, and a letter from California Community Choice Association. So all of those letters have been provided to our governing body and our Board of Governors. With that, let me go ahead and turn it over to Anna McKenna, our Vice President of Market Design and Analysis. Anna?
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, Board of Governors, WEM governing body members, colleagues, and members of the public. I'm happy to introduce Becky Robinson, our Director of Market Policy and Development. Becky will be presenting to you a proposal to modify our bid cost recovery rules as they apply to storage resources. This is a near-term solution that enables the ISO and stakeholders to address the potential for resources to bid in a manner that could unduly inflate unwarranted bid cost recovery payments. I want to thank stakeholders and CAISO staff for their careful consideration of these complex issues, and I'm especially thankful for the stakeholder contributions that enabled us to arrive to a near-term solution that takes into account how storage resources participate in energy markets. As Becky will share with you, I also want to confirm our commitment to continue our stakeholder engagement to address more holistically the unique issues storage resources pose as they relate to bid cost recovery. I finally want to thank the Market Surveillance Committee, WEM governing body, market expert, and the Department of Market Monitoring for their guidance, and look forward to our continued engagement as we look to resolve bid cost recovery for storage more holistically. And with that, I'll ask Becky to take us through the presentation.
All right, thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, Chair Shori, Chair Kanzioka, and members of the CAISO Board of Governors and Western Energy Markets Governing Body. Pleased to be with you here today to present this item for decision on storage bid cost recovery enhancements. And before I get started, I did just want to thank the staff team here at the ISO, as well as stakeholders, as Anna mentioned, for all the work on this. And in particular, we've got in the room with us today our storage sector manager, Sergio Duenas Melendez, who has been a terrific resource for the ISO on this. So we very much appreciate his effort. All right, so we have identified a need to modify the bid cost recovery rules for storage resources. And it's just sort of getting into the issues. We've identified two concerns that arise from applying today's bid cost recovery rules, which have been in place for quite some time. They apply to all resource types. But when you apply those to storage resources,
Sounds like we have an objector on the line.
Mary, I think you're upper dog.
He was applauding her performance.
Right?
very good. Well, I'm glad he's passionate about storage too. All right, so so the issue that we're here today to address is that when you apply our bid cost recovery rules, which again have been in place for quite some time, they apply to all resource types. But as we've observed, now that our storage fleet has been growing, and as we see sort of how things are working in the market for storage resources, when you apply those rules to storage resources, you can end up doing some things that we don't mean bid cost recovery to do. So the first of those is that you can limit storage resources exposure to real-time prices for when they deviate from their day-ahead schedules. Again, most resources are not, insulated from real-time prices. And the second concern is that you may incentivize strategic bidding by storage resources to inflate their bid cost recovery payments. So the unique attributes of storage mean that applying the same rules results in unequal treatment. And specifically, when we say unique attributes of storage in this context, we're thinking about state of charge limitations, where sometimes the limited state of charge can be what drives a storage resources dispatch rather than simply whether their bid is or is not economic. And secondly, the nature of storage bids themselves, where in the real-time market, we rely on storage resources bids to indicate whether the market should dispatch them in that period or not. And we'll get into that more later in the presentation. But sometimes their bids may be less about simply the cost of operating the resource and more an indication of perhaps an unwillingness or an indication that, you really shouldn't dispatch me in this particular hour, right? For a 4-hour storage resource. And so we'll get into that again more as we go through this. Next slide, please. So first, some background on bid cost recovery. Why do we have it? So resources receive bid cost recovery payments when their market revenues that they receive over the course of the day do not cover the resource's bid costs. And that includes things like startup costs, minimum load costs, and transition costs. That's really thinking about sort of other resource types for the main, in the main. So storage resources don't tend to have those kinds of costs. But when we typically think about bid cost recovery payments going to traditional or conventional resource types, that is often a driver of those. But another reason that we have bid cost recovery is that it incentivizes resources to follow dispatch and bid efficiently by removing any chance that the market operator's dispatch may not cover their operating costs. And so it's a bit of an insurance payment or a guarantee that that your costs will be covered if you follow dispatch, which is a good incentive to provide. And then finally, just want to note that bid cost recovery payments are calculated separately for the day ahead and real-time markets. So, and it's notable here because storage issues, some of the storage issues are quite different in the day ahead and real-time markets. So the day ahead market optimizes overall 24 hours all at once, identifying the optimal times to charge and discharge based on seeing prices for the whole day, again, all at once when the day ahead market clears. And there's, in practice, rarely, if ever, a need for bid cost recovery payments for storage resources in the day ahead market. Because again, prices to charge and discharge are all known all at once. In contrast to that, the real-time market looks forward only over the next couple of hours. And so it's optimizing, the real-time market is optimizing over a moving window as you go throughout the day. in the real-time market, having that market consider advisory future prices often helps save or build state of charge for future intervals of higher value. But sometimes those expectations may play out differently once you get to the actual binding interval, meaning that there, can be arguments for providing bid cost recovery for storage resources in the real-time market. Next slide, please. All right, so we've gone through the issue and some background. And so now here is our proposal. So we are proposing to update the calculation of real-time bid cost recovery for storage resources. And specifically, we are not proposing to eliminate bid cost recovery for storage resources here. We're just proposing to calculate it differently. And so we are proposing that we consider alternative values as a proxy for the cost of the resource, besides simply assuming that the bid is the cost of the resource. And notably, the alternatives that we are proposing to consider are not within the control of the resource. So on this table here, we have two calculations depending on whether the market is dispatching the storage resource up on the one hand or down relative to the prior market. So for instance, for a resource that is dispatched down, the value that we would use to represent their cost would be the maximum of either their bid or the minimum of three alternative market values. And those are the real-time market clearing price, the real-time default energy bid, or the day-ahead market clearing price. And in effect, we only use the resources bid under these calculations if that would result in less bid cost recovery payments compared to using the market term that we're choosing here. And so I went through the one equation. If the resource is dispatched down, if the resource is dispatched up, the calculation is simply inverted to be the minimum of the bid or the maximum of the three alternatives. And I should note that for that last alternative value, the day-ahead market clearing price, we will only consider that value in the equation if the resource has a day-ahead award in the interval that you're looking at for the bid cost recovery calculation. So that could be true sometimes for resources in the California ISO BA footprint. And for resources in the Western Energy Imbalance Market, it will always be the case that if they're just participating in the energy imbalance market, they do not have a day-ahead award. And so we will not be considering that third term in the equation because we don't have day-ahead LMPs for those resources in the same way that we do otherwise. But the main point that I want to emphasize here is that by using these market data points as cost proxies, we're removing the ability of the resource to use their bids to inflate bid cost recovery payments. Because if the bid is sort of at a more extreme value, the bid cost recovery will simply be calculated using a different value of cost, which is not within the resource's control. And then finally, for this to be an effective method, we propose to apply the new calculation across all hours of the day. And we think this is a key point because, and the Market Surveillance Committee and the market expert opinions speak to this point as well. But really what we see is the net profit depends on the difference between bid costs in different intervals. And so we think it's important that the new calculations apply across the whole day. So that's really sort of, again, sort of closing this loophole of where your bids can be used to inflate bid cost recovery payments. Next slide, please. All right, so as far as stakeholder engagement, we began this stakeholder initiative in July, and it's had a pretty accelerated timeline since then to try and get at this issue. We sort of identified it as a market vulnerability and wanted to act quickly in order to close that vulnerability, close it out. So we had 7 stakeholder meetings, 5 opportunities for written comment. And in just the first couple of stakeholder meetings, we really did get to broad stakeholder agreement that the status quo creates poor incentives and was a problem that we needed to solve. And I think that speaks to, the good faith engagement that we got from the stakeholder community. And I really appreciate that. And I think that was really notable that, that we were, so quickly able to kind of get in gear and orient ourselves towards, we have an issue on our hands and we need to address it. And so the proposal that we're bringing you today was very much informed by that stakeholder conversation. Now, it is a modified version of a solution that was put forth by stakeholders. So the calculations themselves that we just talked through were proposed by a group of 4 stakeholders and were iterated on in that stakeholder initiative. But there is a key difference between the proposal as stakeholders suggested it and what we're proposing to you today for decision. And that is how the calculations are applied. So the stakeholder group that proposed these calculations proposed that they would apply them only to certain intervals based on some triggering criteria. But as we sort of, again, worked through this issue, and as we discussed on the prior slide, we felt strongly that for this method to be effective, in order to close the loophole, it needed to be applied across the board, where bid cost recovery calculations consider all intervals of the day. And so, again, as we sort of were talking about in the prior slide about how the profit is really driven by the difference in bids between different intervals, we felt like if you're only covering some of those intervals, then there's still the ability to, there is still that loophole where a bid at a more extreme value, say, could drive a quite likely difference between values used for the bid cost in different intervals and drive inflated bid cost recovery payments in that way. So that is a key piece of our proposal, and it is a key distinction in terms of what was put forth in that stakeholder process. And then I think this is my final slide, but we recommend approval of the proposed changes we're bringing to you today. We think that these changes will provide proportionate bid cost recovery payments to storage resources. Again, we are not eliminating bid cost recovery in any instances. We're simply sort of changing what we use as a proxy for cost in those calculations. And this proposal, we have been, working with our implementation teams. We think it is feasible to, further develop that in the near term, get that in place in the near term, and resettle the market back to the FERC approved effective date, assuming we get to that point. Resettle the market at that point for unwarranted bid cost recovery payments once it's effective. Some stakeholders supported our proposal at where we landed as a viable near-term compromise, but noted, there was still interest that we're not really done talking about these issues, talking about how storage resources are dispatched in the market and how they are, or may not always be 100% in charge of their state of charge. Other stakeholders, on the other hand, opposed our proposal, feeling that it could be overly conservative and perhaps punitive to them. We disagree with that perspective. We note that, again, we're not eliminating the bid cost recovery payments, and we are, under our proposal, making the resource whole to those objective cost proxy values that we're choosing there. But, noting that there is, this has been a very robust stakeholder engagement. There's been robust stakeholder engagement on this. We've gotten a lot of involvement from our stakeholders, and there is a lot of interest in continuing these conversations. We are kicking off a new initiative on storage design and modeling, I believe next month. We've got a date saved on the calendar internally. Stay tuned for an actual announcement of when that meeting will be. And as part of that, I think we want to put more on the table, right? So we had a near-term sort of vulnerability in front of us that in this instance, we wanted to address quickly to sort of, close the door on an open vulnerability. But we certainly appreciate and agree that these issues warrant further consideration and thinking, and look forward to working with stakeholders on those topics. And I think as part of that, it'll be critical that we are, continue our good faith efforts to work with stakeholders to share what we're seeing, to be transparent, to sort of share analysis of what we're seeing in the markets and what is guiding our thinking on this. And just to kind of quickly note, what are those, that new initiative, it'll be thinking about continuing to think about bid cost recovery, especially, with some other storage market design elements in mind as well. So with that, I will pause. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. So let me just note, so at this point, we'll have an opportunity for the board and the governing body for questions for Becky. Then we have the MSC, DMM, and public comment, and then we'll have another opportunity for any kind of final comments from the board or governing body before we vote. So with that, do we have any questions for Becky? And I see some hands up before I should have looked before I asked. So Severin, you're the top on the list, at least from what I see.
I think Anita's hand was actually up first, but
let's just go.
okay. So maybe this is an unfair question to ask without giving you a heads up, but off the top of your head, Becky, thank you, by the way, for an excellent presentation. Can these three alternatives, if we look backward and ask the question, what share of bids would actually be altered in this way? Is this something that is happening frequently, or is this something that only in rare occasions would the alternative kick in?
That's a great question, Severin. And I don't have a number for you in terms of how often those would kick in. I will say we did look at some specific examples that had come across our plate in terms of, without wanting to attribute, nefarious intent, examples that raised questions about strategic bidding, right? Mm-hmm. And so in those examples where we applied the proposal that's here before you, we did see significant reduction of bid cost recovery payments in those specific examples. Now, those examples, you may say, well, they were on our radar for a reason, right? So they're the ones where it is more likely that the proposal here would have more impact. But certainly we felt like that was a good sign that, in looking at sort of where we thought something was questionable in terms of what was happening, this had an impact that we thought was positive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Severin. Anita?
So Becky, well done. And I do see we need to close the gap, if you will, but if you go to the last slide, and I think it's your last bullet, I'm always a little uncomfortable when we leave things like kind of open. So that last bullet, management is committed to further consideration. So what does further consideration mean? And is it in 6 months? Is it in 2 years? I'd like to get that more well defined.
That's a great point. We are planning to kick off this new initiative next month, I believe, in December. There will be a date that we'll put out a notice to have that sort of meeting to do this. And so the topics there really, I don't want to just frame it as we're just continuing this conversation, right? I think it is, we're going to have a bit of a different framing on it for that, because bid cost recovery, I think there will continue to be interest in talking about that, but talking about it in relationship to other storage market design elements. So things like default energy bids for storage resources, how we calculate those today. So if storage resources are mitigated, that's the value that if we lower their bids, we may lower their bids to that value. Also, whether we would, what standard we would use if we were ever to approve sort of one-off exceptions to their default to a standard default energy bid calculation, right? If someone felt like that was not an appropriate value on a given day for a given set of circumstances, how would we adjudicate such a request? Also, considering elements, market design elements like biddable state of charge for storage resources, which would be sort of a new model for how storage resources could participate in the market, different than how they bid today, right? Just based on their range of output, but bidding based on their state of charge instead would, it's an area that we've heard interest in the past for sort of for different reasons, but there's maybe implications related to the bid cost recovery payments based on how that participation sort of looks different. So elements like that we want to put on the table as well, both because that's been on our minds and has been, those elements have popped up in other stakeholder conversations. We know there's interest in talking about those elements of storage market design, but again, there's implications of the bid cost recovery design it overlapping with those. And so I don't want to frame it just as we're here today with part A, we'll be back with part B. I think we are intending this to be a broader, more holistic conversation about storage design and modeling, and bid cost recovery will be an element of that among others.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Next, we have John Prescott.
Okay, thanks, Becky. This occurs to me, it's a pretty high-speed solution that came up, and there were a lot of changes that came in, over the last few days, and I know they're all in the spirit of trying to make it better, and I realize this solution isn't the ultimate solution. I get that, but good job for getting a solution in place in a timely manner, but that also raises some concerns about a complex topic being solved so quickly. So could you speak a little bit about how, if this is passed and implemented, it's going to be monitored for its efficacy of what it's supposed to do, and I guess for lack of a better term, that it doesn't produce a whack-a-mole type response. In other words, you solve this problem, but it creates another one that pops up elsewhere. So the question really is, how is this going to be monitored?
That is a great question, and it's a good reminder that we will need to do that. So I will note, on your point about it is a complex solution that we've tried to solve quickly, and I agree with you. I think that's an apt observation. I will say we did work closely with multiple folks on our settlements team throughout the stakeholder development process to make sure that they were sort of tracking the proposals, thinking about them, thinking through actual settlement calculations, right? Which get to be pretty big spreadsheets to look through and spend time with. But so I just share that in terms of we did try and really get ahead of and make sure that we were thinking through things. That said, it is often, if not always, the case that you put things in place and then you learn afterwards something new. So I think so we will be monitoring. I suspect that it's fair for me to commit my colleague Guillermo to reporting out on this in the Market Performance and Planning Forum, where he reports out on a lot of market performance issues. I think we can, we have a dashboard internally where we monitor storage bid cost recovery payments anytime and all the time, right? It's available, transparent, as we've been doing throughout this initiative, right? Sort of, especially as we shared the recipe, if you will, for what this problem was that we were trying to solve. So we will continue to do that. I think that monitoring, again, a forum like the Market Performance and Planning Forum is a good one. We may also want to kind of introduce some of that monitoring into the stakeholder meetings themselves to share with, to have that open and transparent with stakeholders. What are we seeing? And, just so that it's part of that conversation and we can incorporate the market realities into the sort of theorizing and about ideas for how we might participate differently in the future. Thank you for the question. And that will certainly be on our minds and we will be doing that.
Okay, thanks. I look forward to those reports.
Thank you, John. Joe Edo, you have your hand up.
Yes, again, good presentation. I kind of want to continue Anita's question, which is, I see what we're doing today is sort of the tip of the iceberg. And this is such an important and strategic resource for the ISO. I want to get as much right as quickly as possible to set the precedent going forward. The number of things that you identified as stuff that will go into this next round of, all sounds great. But my question is how fully scoped is this next phase? And it is part of the next phase to include a scoping about how broadly this next set of initiatives will be, taking a look at. Because I'd like to make it broader rather than narrower in the interest of having this discussion start sooner.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. I think we do want to put a lot of things on the table. We also want to continue to progress through making improvements where we can. So I would say it's not fully scoped, Joe, to your point. Sergio, since you'll be leading the initiative, do you want to kind of speak to some of that in more detail?
Yes, thank you, Becky, and good afternoon. I would say that we do have a good sense of some of the topics that should be in the scope of the initiative moving forward, and we don't want to lose momentum on the conversations regarding holistic redesign of uplift for storage resources. At the same time, we recognize that there are several topics that have been raised by stakeholders through our catalog process too. So the idea would be to get started, hit the ground running with these topics regarding uplift, where there's already been conversations and alignment, and we can keep the policy development moving forward. And at the same time, allow for stakeholders to voice their priorities of the other topics that are included under the umbrella of this initiative, so that we can have a cohesive plan that takes stakeholder input on how to advance in a staggered fashion through all of the different topics that we want to touch upon. It's very important that we keep them under the same initiative from my perspective, because all of them are interrelated, and our thinking on some will impact the options we have on others. But we don't want the diversity and number of topics to slow down progress on a matter like this, where we've already had buy-in and conversations, and we can use the momentum to keep working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very reassuring. Appreciate that, Sergio.
Thank you, Joe. I don't see any other hands from the board or governing body, and I'll give you a moment if you wanted to raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we can turn to Ben Hobbs from the Market Surveillance Committee. Ben?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hear you great.
Okay, that's great. Good afternoon, governors and governing body members. I'm pleased to represent the committee, which also includes Doctors Jim Bushnell and Scott Harvey, in order to summarize our comments on the ISO's proposal for revising procedures for calculating bid cost recovery payments in the real-time markets for storage resources when those resources are deemed to have incurred certain types of losses in the real-time markets. So to summarize our conclusions, we thoroughly agree with the ISO and the Department of Market Monitoring that there exist important and concerning incentive problems that could result in two undesirable outcomes. One is significant unearned financial transfers as a result of something that we call phantom losses. And the second undesirable outcome are market inefficiencies from managing the storage in such a way to increase system costs and perhaps endanger reliability. As we discussed in the opinion, and as Becky just pointed out, we believe that there are several potential bidding strategies that can significantly inflate bid cost recovery payments and result in premature depletion of the gas in the tank of the state of charge at little risk to the storage resource who is engaging in that behavior. So we think there should be two goals of the reforms in the long run. And the first goal is addressed in this proposal. The second goal will have to await to the phase 2 that Becky talked about. So the first should be to eliminate what could be called bid cost recovery and phantom losses. And this results from including resource charging bids and discharge offers in the bid cost recovery calculation, or rather in the sort of the deemed profits for the purpose of calculating bid cost recovery. We believe that this goal of elimination will be partially, but not completely accomplished by implementing the ISO's proposal. And other practically implementable proposals discussed in the draft final proposal would also address that, but there isn't evidence that those would be more or less effective than the ISO's proposal. And so we don't see any particular advantages of the other proposal. We definitely support this immediate addressing of this first goal by modifying the bid cost recovery calculation to eliminate the BCR on phantom losses to the extent that it's workable. And for example, the first proposal the ISO made turns out to be not practical, but perhaps we will learn in the next process a way to make it practical. The ISO's proposal, which is based on all 24 hours, we think is the right way to go, so that there aren't, it doesn't open the door to potential strategies of changing offers and bids in hours where there isn't a day ahead schedule, which is something that some of the other proposals open the door to. Whether or not the phantom losses and the bid cost recovery that result from those are eliminated does depend on the situation. For example, on interactions with recharging to maintain regulation capacity. And we have no blanket statement about which of the proposals will be most effective, or what fraction of the phantom losses experienced over the past year would be eliminated to address Governor Bornstein's question. And we are unsure at this point as to whether the cost of implementing this reform will exceed the benefits in terms of lowering the bid cost recovery that consumers ultimately wind up paying. However, despite the ISO's proposals limitations, we believe that the potential is there. There is a big enough weakness of the current bid cost recovery system that can be taken advantage of, that the Department of Market Monitoring has shown that at least early in the stakeholder process that has been taken advantage of to inflate bid cost recovery payments. Although it seems to be less prevalent more recently, I don't think we can count on that. So we believe that this proposal as an interim to put a thumb in the hole in the dike for the time being to close this opportunity is worthwhile doing. Now, there's a second long-term goal, which neither this proposal nor the ones made by stakeholders discussed in the draft final proposal address. And that's the problem of incentives to inefficiently discharge your storage earlier than would be optimal. And it's sometimes called, Sergio has called it the insulation from real-time prices that can occur. So what's going on there? Basically, the present bid cost recovery system reduces the cost of storage resources from losses that they incur when they prematurely deplete their state of charge or prematurely fill their charging capacity compared to what's optimal for the system. It's sort of heads they can win, but tails they don't lose. The heads winning part is if they discharge earlier to grab some high prices, but maybe not prices near the cap, but somewhat high prices during the day, if they make money, if the cost of then buying back their day ahead schedule later in the day is lower and they make a profit, they win. On the other hand, if the prices later in the day are very high and the cost of buying back their day ahead schedule results in a loss, then bid cost recovery can partially or largely insulate them from that loss. So this on balance increases the incentive to discharge earlier, a problem that in general that we're concerned with. And this potential problem is not addressed by the ISO's proposal in the way that phantom losses in bid cost recovery is. So regardless of whether the current proposal is adopted, further changes in the bid cost recovery design are definitely needed. And we need a more complete empirical analysis of the actual amounts of bid cost recovery payments that arise from phantom losses. And the sort of analysis, again, that Governor Bordenstein alluded to, in order to, and then simulations of the impact of different proposals to see if there's some that are systematically more effective in lowering phantom losses without perhaps exposing storage to clawing back profits that actually they should earn. So at any rate, we support the phase 2 of the initiative that Becky has summarized. One last little note. While we conclude that there is less potential for phantom losses and inflated bid cost recovery payments in the Western energy market outside of the California ISO, we think it's still desirable to make appropriate changes in the bid cost recovery calculation to eliminate the potential for phantom losses and inflated bid cost recovery in the rest of the Western energy market. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Ben. Board governing body, do you have any comments? And Severin, I see you have your hand up, and I think you're first and only at this point.
Thanks, and thanks, Ben. That was helpful. Can I just clarify one thing, because it's actually something you said, and it's something in the memo we got, and this has empirically not been shown to be a large problem yet. I think that's what you and staff are saying, but there's no reason it wouldn't, simply because it sounds like, if I understand this correctly, simply because a loophole that exists has not been widely exploited. Is that correct?
That's it in a nutshell.
Okay.
There are certainly instances, individual instances, as Becky described, that have gotten the attention of staff and DMM, where this has happened. But in terms as a fraction of overall bid cost recovery payments made to storage in the past year, there's not evidence that it's a very large fraction compared to, for example, bid cost recovery that results from discharging storage in response to the multi-interval optimization, which foresees low prices, but then it turns out that prices are high. That's an example of bid cost recovery that that's at least some of us think that could be justifiable. So the total lump that has been paid this last year has not been divvied up into what's resulted from phantom losses versus the others. And there's some evidence that, at least recently, the part due to phantom losses may be relatively small. But there is definitely, there is the loophole. It has at times been exploited. It seems like an obvious money machine. You know, you could just push up your discharge offer and increase your bid cost recovery payment. And, you know, an alternative, of course, is that, you know, filing could be made at FERC for for gaming, but of course that takes a lot of time and is only instance by instant. And I think it would be better. My personal opinion is it would be better to have a systematic closing of the loophole rather than having to address particular instances and parties.
Great, thank you, Ben. And Becky, I should have asked you that question. Is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think Ben covered it and I agree, but yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Saren. Seeing no more questions or comments at this point, we'll move to the Department of Market Monitoring. We have Adam Swadley, Manager, Market and Policy Analysis. Adam.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Shorey, Chair Kanziolka, governors, and governing body members. Thank you for the opportunity today to share a summary of DMM's views on the proposed changes to bid cost recovery, or BCR, rules for battery storage resources. As detailed in DMM's public memo, we do not oppose management's proposal as a temporary short-term measure that may limit some inappropriate bid cost recovery payments, but we emphasize the proposal's role as a temporary measure. We do not view this proposal as a solution to the issues with bid cost recovery designed for batteries. So we agree with the ISO, the Market Surveillance Committee, and stakeholders that there is a lot more work left to do on this topic. A primary purpose of bid cost recovery is to incentivize resources to submit bids that accurately reflect cost so that the market optimization achieves efficient outcomes. However, the current bid cost recovery rules for batteries do the opposite. These rules create incentives for batteries to bid inconsistent with real-time opportunity cost, which can create inefficient market outcomes and potential reliability challenges. Further, as has been discussed, the current BCR rules for batteries are susceptible to gaming. The bid cost recovery calculation for all resources considers both revenues and bid cost. Management's proposal would specifically target the bid cost component of the BCR calculation for batteries by limiting the bids used in the real-time bid cost recovery calculation. The proposal would reduce the ability of battery scheduling coordinators to bid strategically to inflate bid cost recovery payments. However, the proposal does not impact the revenue portion of the BCR calculation. And because of this, storage operators will remain insulated from real-time prices when reversing an infeasible day-ahead schedule or WEIM-based schedule due to state of charge insufficiency. And therefore, the proposal does not effectively address the core efficiency and reliability issues caused by the current rules. Battery resources will still have some incentive to bid inconsistent with cost in an effort to achieve real-time dispatch before the hours of a day-ahead schedule. Management's proposal should reduce the potential for significantly higher losses from gaming of bid cost recovery payments. It may reduce bid cost recovery paid in some circumstances. DMM can't estimate the potential impacts of the proposal due to the complexity of such analysis and uncertainty about future bids and market outcomes that serve as the input to the proposed calculation. However, our prior analyses indicate that extreme bid prices have not been the primary driver of bid cost recovery for batteries. And for this reason, we don't expect the proposal will significantly reduce battery bid cost recovery payments overall. However, the proposal will mitigate the potential for significant increases in BCR paid to batteries as a result of strategic bidding. And it will reduce BCR, we believe, paid in instances where bid costs are the primary driver. We note, however, the proposal does not entirely eliminate the potential for gaming. So in conclusion, DMM does not oppose management's proposal. However, we do view it as an incomplete approach that does not address the underlying efficiency issues of the current BCR rules applied to batteries. And therefore, we strongly encourage the ISO to immediately continue working with stakeholders to develop a more complete and effective solution for the fundamental problems with the current bid cost recovery rules for batteries. So that concludes our summary of DMM's views. Thanks very much. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions for Adam from the governing body or the board? Rob, you have your hand up.
Adam, thank you for sharing the DMM perspective on this and getting right to the point. And I appreciate the frankness that you're sharing. In DMM's opinion, Cal ISO staff was trying to find, to the best that they could, a sweet spot between timeliness and being able to act, and then providing themselves the opportunity then to address this, as been stated, holistically. MSC and now you have stated that the timeliness doesn't quite get us all the way to which would be the preferred approach in doing more now. You don't oppose the proposal, but you clearly don't strongly endorse this proposal. Is your opinion that more should be done now in addressing the immediate needs and then addressing holistically, or get this done because we can and should, and then just emphasize the approach on getting this resolved in a more timely manner? And you probably listened to, and John and Anita and Severn have brought up this point as well.
Yeah, so I think, any measure that would mitigate potential gaming opportunities is a positive step, right? That's a step in the right direction. I think our primary concern is that this should not be the end of the story, right? We think significant more work to do. And so the real emphasis, I think, would be to make sure that there is a firm commitment from the ISO to continue work on this, in the very near future, not as a distant thing that we might take up, someday, but something that's a high priority to continue in the near term, to really sort of holistically address all of the issues with the current BCR design for batteries.
Okay, and then one short follow-up question, and this was asked of staff. Can I assume that this will be on DMM's radar screen so that you will be following this to ensure that this is closely watched, to ensure that no gaming tends to not continue, but occur, and that it's being closely watched?
Yes, absolutely. So it's something that we've, routinely monitored for a long time, look very closely at, particularly since this initiative has launched, with, heightened scrutiny, and we'll certainly continue to do so.
Thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Rob. Any more questions for Adam? Okay, seeing none, we can go to public comment. Silas, if you could instruct our guests as to how to access the comment queue.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom, or if you are dialed in through the phone line, you can please press #2 on your telephone keypad. We do have one hand up in the queue. Carl, you have been sent a prompt to unmute yourself, and you should be able to go ahead.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Carl Stelrecht, and I'm speaking on behalf of the CPUC Energy Division. The CPUC Energy Division supports CAISO's interim proposal for a modified BCR across all hours. And we also support CAISO's continuing work on a more comprehensive solution for addressing unwarranted BCR payments. We feel these efforts are important to ensure reliability and prevent any unwarranted costs for ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Any other comments or questions in the queue, Silas?
We have no other comments in the queue at this time.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Well, let me turn it back to our board and governing body. And if there are any members of the board and governing body that would like to make some comments before we go to a vote, this is your opportunity. Rebecca?
Thanks. Thanks, Roger. I just first want to express appreciation for all of the work done by ISO staff, the stakeholders, MSC, DMM, and our market expert, Dr. Pope. It's been really helpful. And this is a complicated topic. And I feel like, as I think Elliot noted in his comments, that we're charting new territory. I think the California ISO is, first in line in addressing issues surrounding battery storage. And at the same time, it is a hugely valuable asset to have on the system, both in terms of delivering benefits to customers by reduced costs and also improving reliability. With ISO staff's commitment to really do a comprehensive, holistic stakeholder process or initiative, I will be supporting this proposal. And again, really just appreciate the timeliness of getting this information to us. And obviously it's a lot of work, and I appreciate the effort. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. Andy, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Roger. I'm also going to be voting to adopt the final proposal. As has been said, we're kind of breaking new ground here when it comes to batteries, and the policies we have in the market need to be revisited in light of the new technology that's here. I like that today's proposal is going to reduce the chance that strategic bidding will increase bid cost recovery in inappropriate ways, and the proposal will not eliminate warranted bid cost recovery. I also greatly appreciate CAISO's staff and DMM spotting the flaw that can increase consumer costs and that has no benefit to reliability or market efficiency. I think addressing this risk requires moving quickly, has been noted. I like that staff took an approach that invited stakeholder involvement and independent market experts to weigh in. This is the sort of input that I depend on as a decision maker. Yet the process, as also has been noted, did feel rushed, and I heard frustration from stakeholders, from market experts about how quickly it was moving. I heard calls for a more deliberative process with more analysis to understand the impacts of the proposals. I'm not sure what could have been done differently in this particular case, but I do hope that CAISO staff and stakeholders will reflect on opportunities for process improvements. I'll be thinking about that myself. I know the CAISO and the stakeholders have also been taking a fresh look at the stakeholder process, which included a great discussion last week at the Regional Issues Forum in Sacramento. And I'm continuing to process that input myself. Though for me, this initiative highlighted that some of those discussions don't take into account how time sensitive some initiatives are. So I do think it's possible and necessary to have robust stakeholder input and market expert input, even in a quick initiative. And I hope that the stakeholder process discussions consider how we always achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Anna, you have noted that you would like to comment.
Thank you, Roger. If there are no other comments, I wanted to do two
Well,
things.
there are. Rob's got his hand up, but we can go ahead and take your comment now.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm that we are 100% committed to continuing the stakeholder engagement to look at bid cost recovery more holistically. As Sergio noted earlier, we will be starting that next month. We're already taking significant steps to get that going. So if there's any concern about whether or not that will happen, that is in the books, ready to go. So I just wanted to affirm that. And also note that it will be a process where we will be taking a little bit more time to look at things a little bit more deeply and doing probably a little bit more analysis and engaging with stakeholders and all that. And to Member Campbell's statement, we certainly take seriously the need to look at these issues very closely, but also in a transparent and open manner, and we'll be considering that as we continue our efforts. And I also do appreciate Member Campbell's comment that even when you are in an expedited mode, there are things you could do to ensure the process is robust and transparent and folks have time to think about things. Sometimes it's a little bit more challenging, but I take on the responsibility to look at our processes closely and see how we can improve those for the future. So thank you for the feedback.
Thank you, Anna. Rob, you have your hand up?
I do. And for the most part, Member Campbell and Wagner emphasized the points that I would like to make. And so I won't go back through that. And Anna just went through the last part. This was fast moving. It was identified and moved through, and we saw rapid changes. And, a big thank goes out to those who are evaluating this, the staff, DMM, MSC, the market expert. There's also some very high quality input and comments by participants, and the support that we saw from the Boscher on this. Anna, and Becky, you have emphasized in the memo and in the comments and in your response here the need to emphasize to really address this holistically and make it a priority. And it's hard to say what that time frame should be, since it's not even identified yet. In other words, it's not adequately scoped, and there's no problem statement. And that was part of the comments that the Energy Storage Alliance certainly commented on. So I think for myself, that should be something that we follow up on and ensure happens, and make certain that it remains the priority that should be. And so with that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Anita, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I can echo what everyone else has said, so I'm not going to do that. I do appreciate the work that's been done on this initiative across the board, but I want to make sure that the folks who don't support all intervals recognize that we received their comments, we heard the comments. I think this is a case where we are better to be more conservative initially, and since this initiative is going to have a very quick follow-on, not that it'll be done quickly, but there will be time to continue to talk about, is it all intervals or what are the intervals? So I hope those that were uncomfortable with it being on all intervals will recognize a gap's been identified. It's so important to close gaps for the credibility of the market and what we're trying to accomplish, that you will bear with us, stay in there. But I want you to know that we did receive and recognize your comments.
Thank you, Anita. I see no other hands up. And so at this point, we will go ahead with our motion. We have it up. Yes, thank you, Christina. So move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body approve the changes to bid cost recovery for storage as described in the memorandum dated October 31, 2024. And move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body authorize management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the changes proposed in this memorandum, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy but contain discrete revisions to incorporate commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. And can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I think Severin was first on that, and Joe was second. And let's go ahead and take the vote. Vice Chair Bornstein?
Aye.
Member Campbell?
Aye.
Member Decker?
Aye.
Governor Edo?
Aye.
Governor Galitova?
Aye.
Chair Konzioka?
Aye.
Governor Leslie?
Aye.
Member Prescott?
Aye.
Chair Shorey?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Wagner.
Aye.
Thank you, governing body members and board members. The motion passes. With that, we can move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our pathways, decision on Westwide Governance Pathways Step 1 implementation. And this is for me to introduce here, and I will briefly just note that this is back in August, the board and the governing body had approved the Pathways Step 1 proposal and had instructed management to come back with the implementation of the proposal. And this is what we are doing today. And so that means governance documents and some tariff changes. And to present this proposal or this measure is Dan Schonkweiler, our Assistant General Counsel, who has worked tirelessly for months and months on this. Dan, are you available?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Fantastic. I am. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As Roger alluded to the decision approving the Pathways Step 1 proposal in August. Trying to change the slides. I guess I'll go to the next. Thank you. When you all jointly approved that proposal, you directed management to come back with revisions or proposed revisions to the governing documents and to the tariff to be so that we're ready to implement that proposal. And I say ready because these changes don't become effective now. They become effective when the trigger criteria from the step one proposal are satisfied. And that has to do with obtaining EDAM commitments from utilities that collectively meet criteria about their combined load and their geographic diversity. This is expected to happen at some point in 2025. We're seeking approval for these changes now, among other reasons, because it's going to take time to get a FERC order, and we need to allow FERC time to issue a ruling on the tariff amendment that's an aspect of these changes. We go to the next slide. Thank you. As a reminder, there's been a lot of discussion internally about pathways step two. Let's step back and remember what step one was about. There are three core pieces. First is to elevate the role of the WEM governing body on those matters within their authority from joint authority to primary authority. And that's something primary authority used to be part of the process a few years ago. Second, the pathways proposal would keep the dispute resolution that would hypothetically apply if there were a situation where the board and the governing body could not approve the same proposal, except it would add at the end of that process the possible option for a dual filing, which is how Pathways describes something that ISO New England does, where they call it a jump ball filing. It involves filing two proposals with FERC and letting FERC decide what to approve, which parts to approve. Finally, there is the Pathways Launch Committee and the final proposal had additional language mostly for what I'd call the mission statement for the WEM governing body in the charter to emphasize additional factors that ought to be considered in deciding on proposed tariff amendments. And these include things like consumer interests and preservation of state and local authority. Slide, please. Implementing these changes requires amendments to 3 internal governing documents, including the Charter for WEIM and EDAM governance, the corporate bylaws, and the guidance document. That's the process through which staff, including me, arrive at a final decisional classification for these presentations to you. And in addition, there's the amendment to Section 15 of the tariff that has to be filed with FERC. These proposed revisions, most of them are dictated in red lines in Appendix D to the final proposal. Some of them we draw from the very good descriptions in the Pathways Step 1 proposal. I just want to say that proposal pretty much dictated what we had to say. There wasn't a lot of room for creative interpretation here or interpretation at all. Next slide, please. So if you're reviewing the red line documents that were included in the package, most of the changes, nearly all of them, are in the Charter for WEIM and EDAM governance, which is the main document that implements the delegation of the. That's where there's the main specification of actually what does it mean exactly to change the role of the governing body from joint authority back to primary authority. We had some language before. It also, at the end of the process for resolving possible disagreements, we added the possible dual filing with FERC. And then finally, there is, again, the specific language from the proposal added to the mission of the WM governing body. There are also 2 other changes later in the document. One, related to governance review, authorizes the governing body to initiate a review of governance if a majority of EDAM entities were to depart. And then finally, there's some clarification, additional authority for the body of state regulators that they may provide opinions ultimately to FERC. Next slide, please. The other 2 governing documents, the bylaws and the guidance document, the substantive revisions are pretty much limited to specifying that what had been joint authority will become primary authority. Next slide. And then finally, the section 15 of the tariff needs to be amended. It currently and for a long time has stated that provision it's why we have these meetings. It's provision that says that before the ISO can file a tariff amendment at FERC, the board must approve those changes in writing. And that works as it's worked for 10 years as it is, but it needs to be amended to have the dual filing option, because the very idea of a dual filing is that there is a proposal that the board does not approve, but the WEM governing body does. And so we've got new language to handle that and then informing adjustment. This language is both from the approved step 1 proposal about what the dual filing option means, and also some from the ISO New England governing documents that FERC had approved and that form the basis for their jump ball filings. And so we are trying to conform as tightly as possible to that approved FERC precedent. Next slide. Regarding the future effective date, to avoid any uncertainty about when the trigger criteria are met and any disruption of an ongoing meeting, we're adding a step. So in addition to the trigger criteria from the Pathways Step 1 proposal about load, geographic diversity, et cetera, there also has to be a certification by the CEO or COO. They'll issue a notice to the board, the governing body, and a market notice to stakeholders. Now the new governing rules are in effect. And this notice could be issued with a slight delay. And that's, as I said, to avoid legal uncertainty. You can imagine some of the events that would trigger the effectiveness of these new rules in the future are outside the ISO's control. If they were to happen during or right before one of your meetings, it could cause legal issues. And we'd rather have at least the possibility, if necessary, to delay the effectiveness so there's legal certainty around your action. That's the end of my presentation. Can I answer any questions?
Dan, I have a quick question. I know that we had talked about the dual filing before in the GRC and had extensive discussions. Can you provide a little bit of color behind the decision making to bring back the dual filing option, and how you think and when you think that may actually be triggered? Hopefully it's very, very rare and after extensive discussions and opportunities for resolution.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I can't comment on the launch committee's thinking in proposing it or all the stakeholders who commented on it. But the idea is to break a possible deadlock. And as you alluded to, this is something we hope doesn't happen. It gets into parts of the process that I'll describe here in a moment that have never been used. But the idea is that here's the circumstances in which this would be used. If a proposal came up through the policy shop and is first under primary authority voted on and approved by the EIM governing body, but then rejected by the board, then that would trigger what's called in the charter for WEM and EDAM governance, the dispute resolution process. And so then, which would presumably in a joint meeting, both bodies would discuss, where are our concerns? What kinds of changes might need to be made to the proposal to find something acceptable? They might encourage stakeholders to comment, and all this is specified in the charter. Then it would go back down to policy, who would stakeholder a new proposal, something with the direction and guidance they've been given. And that would have to come back a second time. And then it would go through the primary authority process the second time. First voted on by the governing body, and then if approved, voted on by the board. And that would be in a joint meeting. And only then, if the new proposal did not pass both bodies, and the bodies thought that the better way to proceed was to put something on file, they could vote to each prove their own proposal. And then a filing with two proposals in it, and there's something to be said about how that would happen, but would go before FERC, and FERC could choose any and all of either proposal to approve. Now, the entire process I just described has never happened. The stakeholder process is designed to funnel stakeholders and policy and everyone involved to agreement. But if it were to ever, so we don't expect this to occur, but that would be the process.
I hope so. Just one quick question as a follow-up, and thank you, Dan. This was very comprehensive and always excellent as your work tends to be. New England, has that ever been triggered? In New England, do we know?
I know of at least, I had to research that once upon a time, maybe for you in the GRC, at least 4 times New England has submitted dual filings, and that FERC has ruled on that by approving one or the other proposal or parts of each. Yes.
So FERC could actually have a blended proposal, like have parts of one and the other and combine a separate solution.
That's correct, and that's specified in the document. Within any limitations, we would specify about pieces that need to be approved together, either for technological reasons or due to a political compromise, et cetera. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angelina. Mary?
So Dan, thank you for all your hard work. And I'd just like to clarify one more time because it was unclear when we were briefed. The trigger mechanism. The trigger mechanism is in the memo, but was not in any of the documents. And now I see policy adopted 1215. No, policy adopted. When is the policy adopted and implemented? Before or after the trigger?
The proposed revised governing documents that we're seeking approval on would not be implemented, would not become effective until after the trigger is satisfied, until after there are EDAM commitments from entities that collectively have 70% of California's load in the specified geographic diversity. Only after that. Is that what you were
Only
looking
after that. And that's signed contracts.
I'd have to defer to Mark or somebody else on the implementation agreement specifications.
Right, but that would be per the implementation agreements, and that ultimately the trigger is met by that 70%, and then one of the provisions is an officer, the CEO or the COO certifies that the trigger has been met. So there are kind of the stop gaps in there, or belt and suspenders, if you want to say, to make sure that that trigger has been met and that we agree that it has been met.
So when you say 70% of the agreements have been signed, effectively committing the VA to the EDAM, unless they voluntarily choose to depart at some point.
Dan?
The first part, it does not, this cannot happen until several things happen, one of which is, yes, I'm reading it, executed EDAM implementation agreements from entities that have a combined load of 70% or more. There's nothing specified here about it's left open. It would be a situation everyone would have to handle if one of those entities then departed. So that's left for all of us to deal with if that were to happen.
And we don't say how long one has to be a member.
That's right. That would be a part. That's left to deal with. There's also the additional clause saying that we could revisit all of this if half or more of the EDAM members left.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any other questions for Dan? Okay, at this point, Silas, if we can see if there's any public comment.
If you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on your telephone keypad. There are no hands up in the comment queue at this time.
Thank you, Silas. Before we go to a motion, let me go ahead and give the governing body and the board an opportunity if you have any final comment before we go to motion. Okay, seeing none, let me go ahead with the motion. Move that the Board of Governors and the WEM governing body approve the proposed amendments to the charter for WEIM and EDAM governance, the corporate bylaws, and decisional classification guidance for the WEM governing body, as discussed in and attached to the memorandum dated October 24, 2024. Move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body authorize management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the tariff amendment proposed in this memorandum, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy but contain discrete revisions to incorporate commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. And move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body direct management to only publish and implement the approved governance changes and the tariff amendment, assuming it is FERC approved, after the trigger criteria for effectiveness from the Pathway Step 1 proposal and management certification of such is satisfied, as set forth in the process detailed in the memorandum dated October 24, 2024. Can I have a moving party, please?
This is Rob. I'll move that.
Second.
Rob, I'm sorry, who was second?
Anita.
Thank you, Anita. So Rob was first, Anita second. Vice Chair Bornstein, your vote, please.
Aye.
Member Campbell, your vote.
Aye.
Member Decker.
Aye.
Governor Edo.
Aye.
Governor Galetova.
Aye.
Chair Konzioka.
Aye.
Governor Leslie.
Aye.
Member Prescott.
Aye.
Chair Shorey.
Aye.
And Vice Chair Wagner.
Aye.
Thank you, governors and governing body members. The motion passes. The last item on our agenda today is informational reports, and they are exactly that. There are reports provided for your information, but we give you an opportunity, if needed, for any questions on those reports. And so if anyone has any questions on the informational reports, now is the time. Seeing none. Agenda item, I lied, I said the last agenda. Agenda item 7 is future, I should read ahead, future agenda items. And this is my opportunity to inquire whether there's anything that any of the governing body or board members would like to note for the record as future agenda items. Seeing none, we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time and the excellent presentations today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Thanks,
everyone.
Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers.